wants to be king!
When I was growing up, they told us that big boys didn't cry. And so, regardless of how we were feeling, regardless of what we wanted to do, we learned how to choke those things down, how to swallow any distasteful feelings like a good boy. And then somewhere along the way, they told men and boys that they needed to become more emotional and cry more, show your feelings, too stoic. And at the time, I guess the men who had grown tired of shouldering the burden of pretending like they didn't have feelings, that their emotions were irrelevant, they breathed a sigh of relief, not knowing that that was a trap, that that was a lie. Because nobody likes a whiny, complaining male. And really nobody desires to have those people on their team or in their life. And while those who were benefiting from weak, whiny, complaining men felt like they were gaining power, what happened is we have created a culture where boys grow up not knowing or understanding what their position and place is in life. I grew up swallowing down everything that was painful. And like a good little boy, I learned how to ignore the way I felt and continue to move forward. And I have no grievance with that. I don't think that I would want to be raised the way that young boys are being raised today, to be effeminate, weak, and dependent on the feminine for their meager offerings whenever they're needed. When I came back from doing my own work this past 2 weeks and inched my way back into the social media realm, I saw where Jordan Peterson once again is under attack. And because he had a display of humanity, because the weight of the grievances that this man has taken upon himself in trying to help those who are disaffected and disillusioned in this life, mostly men and young boys, he's been vilified, just like Elliot has been, just like Andrew Tate has, just as they do any man who tells young men and old, whoever find themselves caught in this web of feminist lies and degradation, that it's up to them to stand up and be men. Those men are deemed harmful. And the attack on Jordan Peterson, because he showed a moment of humanity and crying or shedding a few tears on the Piers Morgan interview, a lot of people have taken that as an opportunity to defile the man's character and call him out of his name and try to paint him as something weak because of this. On one hand, I understand how the world looks at a man who cries, but for us men, especially, to act like that's a valid argument, that's a real thing, we're complicit in the destruction of our own. Because even the strongest man, even the strongest, most savage of men, is still a human being. And while it's not advantageous to run around whining and crying about every single thing, sometimes the weight and the pain that life constantly brings to a man in his journey to find himself, the best version of himself, sometimes that weight becomes unbearable. and you've got to let it out. You have to let it out. And this idea that we're weak if we do this, that we're some sort of lesser man for having these feelings, I believe that's part of the reason why so many men are punching their own ticket. Because to feel is not allowed. And when you live in a society that tells the males that they're no longer needed, that they're worthless, you combine that with the rhetoric that men are not supposed to have emotions, and when they do show that they're human, that they're weak, then what hope does a man have? What hope does a young boy have? You know, when I watched that interview with Morgan and Peterson, when his dam broke for a moment, I felt the emotion that man carries in his heart. And anybody who looks at that and throws a stone at him, in my mind, is a weak person. Because those who have a box full of rocks to throw at people who are vulnerable enough to be real, oftentimes those people are the biggest cowards with the most to hide. They hide behind their boldness and their willingness to point the finger at other people who get on the stage and show the real person and not a mask to the world. The people who look at that man and try to poke fun at him being a human and don't take into consideration the things that he's heard. The people who have come to him and thanked him for the words that he speaks and talked them off the ledge. The people who throw stones at men like Peterson haven't done a fraction of what he's done just in the last 3 to 5 years. You know, one of the biggest tasks for a man is to balance the weight of being a man and the weight of also being a human. And I'm very thankful for the experiences that I've had in my life and the people that the Lord has put in my path to give me the tools that I needed to right my path, to find the man that I was supposed to be. When I was just 22 years old, I found myself in a cycle of falling into the lies that I was told, and because I believed the adults who raised me, I went down a path that landed me in the penitentiary. And when I got there, that was my agoge. That was my transfer from boyhood into manhood, because that's not a place where you want to be a little boy. That's not a place where the habits of a little boy are acceptable. And so as I entered that space and tried to formulate my armor in there, adjust to the world, the jungle that was now my day-to-day life, I got a letter that my grandfather died. And the weight of that letter, the gravity that pulled on my heart, was palpable. And it was also visible to those who had grown up watching despair. And that day I got that letter, I was lost. And the guy that everybody was afraid of, the biggest monster on that wing, saw that my soul was broken. And I remember trying to swallow that down and continue to present myself as a lion. The old lion saw, and he told me, "Come sit down, youngster. Let me holler at you for a minute." And so I went into his cell and I sat on the floor, and He asked me, what was in that letter you just read? And I told him. And he saw that I was trying so hard to swallow my pain. And he told me, it's okay if you cry, big dog. You're just a man. And in that moment, he freed me. He freed me of the lie that I believed that led me to feel the way that I felt about myself. And while I never have been one to whine and cry about things that happened, losing my grandfather was horrible. And we all knew that he was going to die, but we weren't ready for it. And when the most dangerous man on that wing, the most respected man on that block, gave me a permission to be human, I realized that being a man was way more than pretending to be tough, to pretend to be okay, to act like nothing bothered us. To be a man was to be strong, to be capable, to be respected, but also be human and notice when another man was in pain and give him the space, the room, the blessing to let that pain go. So many people in this space want to be paper tigers. It's easy to get online and posture and pretend because there's a sea of lambs, there's a sea of sheep who desperately want to hear this message of weakness. And these men want to pound on their chest like they're some sort of invincible alpha, but with the slightest tweak you see chinks in their armor that would yield them a mortal blow if you just touch them. What I'm saying here is very, very simple. If you want to make your team solid, then you must surround yourself with men who not only call it out when you're being weak, when you're being a whiny pussy, but are also aware and strong enough to give you the room to be a human and give you permission to let that pain go if and when you need to do so. When I watched Jordan Peterson, when I watched the dam behind his eyes break for a minute, I didn't see weakness. I didn't see anything that was less than admirable. I saw a strong man who has taken it upon himself to shoulder the burden of the disaffected young men that this society has ruined. And I saw a man give in to a moment of humanity. But I also saw that man swallow it down, choke it back like a good soldier, and continue marching forward. In life, you can't always be a monster. In life, sometimes even the lions cry. Out.